This session we're going to continue working with BONDAWEB, and I'm going to show you some different ideas of how you can make use of what you've got at home. So the great thing about BONDAWEB is that you can use stuff like this, which is quite stretchy, this stretchy jersey. It's a bit like t-shirt material. This is t-shirt material. So this is just an old set of pants. You can use stuff like this to make it firm and to make it easy to draw your pattern on the back and to then cut it out as well. So remember, you've got your webbing on the back, that's the glue webbing. This one's come off because I haven't kept it in a folder. Put it where you want it on your fabric and iron it in place. Then you might use one of your patterns that you've created already, one of your templates, put it in place and draw around it. Most of you will have cutouts within your design, so again it's really good to use your scalpel blade here. If you haven't got a scalpel blade, then you can use a small set of scissors. I'll show you both. So especially with these small little pieces here, it's really good to have your blade to hand, because you can cut those out quite easily. So if you haven't got a cutting mat, you can just use something like a chopping board. So if you haven't got a blade, you can fold along one of your straight lines. You cut along that line, and you can open it up again, put your scissors in. Use nail scissors if you haven't got any little thread scissors. If you haven't got nail scissors, just use whatever the sharpest set of scissors you've got. Work your way around there. Got birds nesting up above me, so they're going nuts. So I've now got my flowers cut out. I've also used some gold. I had a little bit of gold fabric, so I put some BONDAWEB on the back of this and I cut it out, but I flipped my pattern when I did this one, so I've got an opposite. I just wanted to see what that would look like. So before you iron your work down, make sure that you've got it like central to the piece that you're going to iron it onto. So this set of jeans, where I've cut out the leg, I've cut it close to the seam, but it tapers up. So you need to look at where the narrowest part of the jean is in order to make sure that when I cut it down, I've got the same size border here and here. Now you might be thinking, oh, this is just a sample for my book. But if you start working further and deeper into this, you might find that it will develop into something that you want to use for a final piece. So always think about having a border on whatever it is that you're actually experimenting with. So take your backing off. Lay in place. I've already got the backing of this gold. So place over your greaseproof paper and then iron it in place. Okay. Before I show you how to build up the seed head and add some texture to this, I'm going to just remind you of some of the techniques that we used, which you might find helpful, especially if you haven't got much choice of fabric or anything that you can recycle. So you remember when we used the plastic bags and we applied different amounts of heat to the plastic bags in order to create different effects on the edge of the plastic. So this has obviously had more heat applied to it, and the edges really distorted, shriveled, so it's given it a really interesting texture. So you can also add your plastic to fabric, so you can melt it straight onto the fabric. So if you're going to have a go at this, you will need to use a fibrous fabric. So I've used felt here, but it also works quite well on something like fleece. So if you've got an old fleece that's either ruined or too small for you, you could cut down a piece of that and use that. It works quite well. Another thing that's quite nice with this is I put this on before melting it, so I put it straight on there, cut out, and then applied the heat. Because it's shrunk up, it's pulled in the seed head and created a more bulbous look there, which is quite nice. Also like where the petals have overlapped, where I put them next to each other, created more depth here, which makes it more interesting. Going back to the flowers on the denim, I've experimented first with what I would do for the centrepiece. So I've used some wool here. You could create higher loop stitches in the centre and then work out to smaller ones. I'll just show you how you go about doing that. Literally just creating a loop. because it's wool. If it's difficult to get it through the fabric, you probably don't even need to tie a knot to keep it in place. If it goes through the fabric easily, if you're using a large weave like your Hessian for example, then you would probably have to tie off at the back before you did your next loop, because otherwise when you pull it through you'll just tighten up the loop before the one you've just made. So you can see that disappearing. I'll make it as large as I like. If I did want to tie it off at the back, if it was too thin, I would just go through my last stitch like that, and then put the needle through the loop, pull it into a knot before I come up again to create another loop. But as I said, this denim is quite thick, so because it's difficult to pull it through, I can probably just save time and just keep making my loops like that. So that's one thing that you could try. I do recommend that you try all these first before you go and do it straight onto your work. It's also good to have a little sample like this in your book. Okay. This here is an old necklace that I had, so I've just cut it and using the beads. They're just plastic beads. This one here is a metal one. It's a little bit more difficult to get the beads off of, but they're quite nice, quite interesting, all a slightly different shaped pieces of stone. And recycle that. These tube beads, I bought these. These weren't very expensive at all. Again, from Franklin's. I think they were 80p for the pack. So this is, I don't know if you can see that if I put it on the side. So I've used these to create height, and then I put the bead on top. So I tried that with the red, and I wasn't too sure about the red being on top. It's okay, but maybe it's a little bit too much. So I thought I'd have a go with some black beads. These are the ones that I recycled from an old necklace. I've used the tube beads first, and then put the little plastic round bead on top. I'll show you how I did that. Put the needle into the tube and make sure that the tube has gone down towards the work, so it's touching the actual fabric. Then put your needle through your bead or whatever it is that you're going to use on top, and then go down the other side of the tube with the needle. So from the top to the bottom rather than the bottom to the top. Okay, and then very close to where you initially pulled your needle through to start off with. And pull it. It's been a bit difficult. If you had a selection of beads, or if you had some tubing, you could cut your tubing to the right length. Oh, I've just done that wrong. You could cut your tubing to different lengths, so you had bigger pieces in the middle, and then you could graduate it out into smaller pieces towards the edge, and then just have little beads at the very edge. Now, because I've used the same fabric as the background, it's going to give me a little bit more of an idea when I eye it up to whether or not that's going to suit what I want, whether or not it's going to work. And do I want the same centrepiece for both of them, or do I want something different going on? I could have a similar style but a different colour bead. For example, if I'm going for a kind of a contrast with my reflection. I also experimented with knot stitch with different thicknesses of thread. So that's the wool that I was using down here for the loop stitch. And then this here is just a couple of thicknesses of the embroidery thread that I sent you. You could obviously go thicker as well and build it up and experiment with it a bit more. But what I think I like the most is this beading here, especially with the tubes underneath and the way that they've created more height in the centre. So I think that's what I'm going to go for with this. Something else that I might try around the outside first though, before I do that. I quite like the end piece of it here. It's quite nice, the end of the chain, which is what's been used to join all of these little beads on with. And it would look quite nice, bordered around the outside edge of here. So I might have a go at putting that in place to see how that looks. So I'm just going to put my needle through one of those oval chains, through to the back again. My thread's quite long, so it's got a little bit knotty. Right, come up behind there, into your next chain and then back into the work. That's right. Back up again under the work. If the needle doesn't come out where you want it to be, just pull it out again until it's where you want it, and back up through into one of those chains, and then down almost next to the stitch that you made, so that you don't want to be bringing this chain too far in. You just want it to border this edge. That's if you do something like this. Obviously, this is just an example. Right, and then just keep repeating. So I'll continue that and then show you what it looks like afterwards. So after experimenting with the chain, I decided to put it on both, and now I'm going to build up the centrepiece. I'm going to build up this seed pod head using the tubing. So this is the little pieces of plastic tube that I've got here. So there's actually beading. You can buy it like this. It's not very expensive. But you could also just find some tubing, like the sort of stuff that you get for fish tanks. You can buy that. It's quite thin. If you're going to do it on a bigger scale, you could possibly use something like that, and then you can cut it to the heights that you want. Whatever people have got around the house that they're not using anymore, you might find everybody's going to have something different, and you might end up with some really original, interesting pieces. So the centre of the flower I've built up quite high, so if I hold it to the side you should be able to see what I've done there. So all the little plastic tubes are coming out, and they are actually naturally, some of them are slightly longer than others, so they're not all the same height, which is good. So I'm going to build up a little bit more in the centre, and then I'm going to come down lower around the outside edge. So I've built up the centre quite a lot, and I've started to put some single beads at the bottom there. So the ones in the middle have got plastic tubes and then a bead, and then around the outside you've just got a single bead, so that it doesn't sort of push too far over the piece of chain that I've put on there. And then put my bead on. And then pull it into place. Like that. Okay, grab another one. So this is quite quick. Takes a little bit longer to do the ones with the tubes, because it's just a little bit fiddlier. But finishing it off around the outside is a quick job. So yeah, have a look, ask for some of the bits and pieces that your mum might not wear anymore, or someone in your family might not wear anymore, and I bet you'll be able to produce some really cool stuff. Okay, so this basically is just made from some plastic beads, some pants. This bit is a bit of gold I actually got from school, but it was just a scrap bit. You can be creative, think about what goes well, what colours work well, what textures work well together. Okay, and that's good enough now. I'll just tie that up at the back. So double knot to finish it off. And there we go. There's that one. So experiment with what you've got, and I really look forward to seeing what you create.